Some secrets are heavy enough to shape an entire lifetime. Thomas Carter carried such a secret for 37 years. And when he died, he left it to me, the son he barely spoke to. My name is Benjamin Carter. I'm 52 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who my father was. A quiet man, a distant man, a man who fixed radios in his cluttered workshop and never seemed to have time for his family. I was wrong about all of it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the day everything changed, the day I learned that failure isn't always what it appears to be, and that sometimes the greatest love is expressed through the deepest silence. The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of Peterson's law office on Main Street in Millbrook, Arizona. Population 8,000, the kind of town where everyone knows your name and most of your business. I sat in a cracked leather chair that had seen better decades, holding a styrofoam cup of bitter coffee I hadn't asked for and didn't want. Attorney Peterson was 65, mostly retired, handling this case as a favor to my father. He wore a cardigan that had gone out of style sometime during the Reagan administration, and glasses that magnified his watery blue eyes to an almost comical degree. He shuffled papers with the careful deliberation of a man who had learned that rushing through life's important moments was a mistake he wouldn't make again. I didn't want to be there. I had a job interview at 3, though calling it that was generous. More like begging Morrison's auto shop to take me back after they'd let me go 6 months earlier. Budget cuts, they'd said. Your position has been eliminated, they'd said. At 52, you learn that eliminated positions and eliminated men feel about the same. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Dylan, my 16-year-old son, probably asking for money I didn't have or permission to do something I should probably say no to. I ignored it. That had become our relationship. Him asking, me ignoring, a cycle neither of us knew how to break. Peterson cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, I know this is difficult. Your father's passing was well unexpected, isn't quite the right word. He'd been sick for some time. I hadn't known that either. Thomas Carter and I hadn't spoken more than a handful of words in the last 5 years. For that, we'd managed maybe a dozen conversations that went deeper than the weather or the Cardinals' latest loss. My entire childhood could be summarized in the sound of tools on metal and the smell of machine oil, punctuated by the vast silence of a father who was always present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. What did he leave? The words came out harsher than I intended, but Peterson didn't flinch. He'd probably heard worse from grieving sons who didn't know they were grieving. A property, an airfield actually, about 40 miles outside town. There are some back taxes owed, nothing excessive, but you'll need to settle them if you want to keep it. An airfield. My father, who'd spent his career fixing broken radios and kitchen appliances in a workshop behind his house, owned an airfield. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if I'd had any laughter left in me. Peterson slid a set of keys across his mahogany desk. They were old, heavy brass things, darkened with age. Military-style keys with numbers etched into the metal. The kind of keys that suggested whatever they opened was built to last and meant to stay closed. There's also this. He produced a yellow envelope, my name written across it in my father's shaky handwriting. He left specific instructions that you were to read this privately. I took the envelope. It felt too light to contain anything important. But then my father had never been one for grand gestures. I stood to leave, eager to escape the musty smell of old law books and older regrets. Mr. Carter, Peterson's voice stopped me at the door. Your father was a good man. I know you two weren't close, but, well, he had his reasons. We all have our reasons. I didn't respond. What was there to say that I'd spent 52 years trying to earn the approval of a man who seemed incapable of giving it? That my wife Linda had died 2 years ago, still hoping I'd reconcile with my father, and now it was too late for both of them, that I was failing my own son in exactly the same way Thomas had failed me. The drive back to my trailer took 15 minutes. 15 minutes of driving through a town that felt smaller every year, past the high school where I'd graduated, past Morrison's auto shop, where I'd worked for 18 years before they decided I wasn't worth keeping, past the house where Linda and I had raised Dylan, before the medical bills forced us to pay it. The trailer park sat on the eastern edge of town, where the desert began its patient reclamation of human ambition. My home was a 32-foot single wide that rattled in strong winds and leaked when it rained. The air conditioning had died in July, and I couldn't afford to fix it. In Arizona, that wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Dylan's bike was gone. He'd be at a friend's house or his girlfriend's place, anywhere but here with the father who'd become a ghost in his own life. I couldn't blame him. After Linda died, I'd retreated so far into my grief that I'd forgotten Dylan was grieving too. By the time I remembered the distance between us had become a canyon neither of us knew how to cross. I sat at the fold-out table that served as my kitchen and opened my father's letter. The paper was thin, the kind that comes in cheap stationery pads. His handwriting wandered across the page like a drunk man trying to walk a straight line. The cancer had been eating him for months before it finally finished the job. Ben, the letter began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I know I wasn't a good father. I spent your whole life in silence, letting you think I was disappointed in you. My throat tightened. I'd never heard my father admit to anything, let alone failure. The truth is, I was never disappointed. I carried a burden too heavy to share. I couldn't tell you about it because doing so would have put you in danger. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. The airfield is my legacy to you. But more important, it's an opportunity. A chance for you to do what I couldn't. Talk to your son. Don't let Dylan grow up in silence like you did. Go to the airfield alone first. Then take Dylan. You'll understand when you see what's there. I've always loved you, Ben. Always. Your father, Thomas Carter. I read it 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. 52 years, and this was the first time I'd ever heard my father say he loved me. The first time, and he'd had to die to do it. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Dad, where are you? Dylan's voice carried that particular mix of irritation and boredom that only teenagers can master. You were supposed to pick me up an hour ago. I'd forgotten. Again. I'm sorry, son. I paused trying to remember what I was supposed to be doing. At your grandfather's property. The airfield. The what, Dad? You're not seriously dealing with Grandpa's junk, are you? It's not junk. The words came out before I'd thought them through. I think your grandfather was involved in something important. Something he never told us about. A pause, then Dylan's voice cautious but curious. What kind of important? I looked at the keys in my hand, at the letter with its careful shaking script. I don't know yet, but I think we're going to find out. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on the narrow bed in my trailer, staring at water stains on the ceiling and thinking about my father. About the man I'd thought I knew and the stranger who'd written that letter. Memories surfaced unbidden. Thomas in his workshop surrounded by the guts of radios and televisions and anything else people brought him to fix. The way his hands moved with absolute certainty over circuit boards and wiring finding problems that would have baffled anyone else. The way he'd look up when I entered, see me, and somehow look right through me all at once. The memory came sharp and clear, like it had happened yesterday instead of 42 years ago. I was 10 years old, standing in the doorway of his workshop on a Saturday morning. The air smelled of solder and electrical components, a scent I'd come to associate with my father's presence. He was hunched over a radio magnifying glass in hand, examining a circuit board with the intensity of a surgeon. Dad, I have a game tomorrow. Baseball, can you come watch? He didn't look up from the radio he was repairing. I'm busy, Ben, ask your mother. But I want you to come. I twisted the hem of my Cardinals jersey. I'm starting pitcher. Coach says I have a real arm. His hands paused just for a moment. I saw his shoulders tense, saw him start to turn toward me. For one heartbeat, I thought he might say yes. Then his hands resumed their work, more focused than before. We'll see. We'll see meant no. It always meant no. The game came and went. My mother was there cheering from the bleachers. I pitched 7 innings, struck out 12, and kept looking at the empty space where my father should have been. We won 9-2. Thomas was in his workshop when I got home fixing the same radio, or maybe a different one. They all looked the same to me. That was our relationship. Him working, me asking, him saying no in a dozen different ways. When I was 18 and graduated high school, he didn't come to the ceremony. When I married Linda 7 years later, he stood in the corner of the reception hall, watching but never participating. When Dylan was born, Thomas held his grandson for exactly 3 minutes before handing him back and retreating to the parking lot. I'd assumed it was disappointment, that I'd somehow failed to be the son he wanted. That assumption had colored my entire life, shaped every choice, poisoned every accomplishment, with the bitter taste of not being good enough. Now reading his letter, I wondered if I'd been wrong about everything. The next morning, I drove out to the airfield, alone as Thomas had instructed. The route took me through desert landscape that hadn't changed much since the last ice age. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels. Red rock formations rose from the sand like the bones of ancient giants. The sky stretched overhead impossibly blue and vast enough to make a man feel insignificant. 40 miles. 40 miles my father had traveled probably every day for decades to maintain whatever secret he'd been keeping. The airfield appeared suddenly around a bend in the road, a collection of weathered buildings and cracked runways that spoke of decades of neglect. A faded sign read, Millbrook Airfield Private Property. The gate was secured with chain and padlock, but the fence had gaps wide enough to walk through. Nobody cared much about security for a place everyone assumed was abandoned. But it wasn't abandoned. I could see that immediately. The main structure, a massive curved hangar of corrugated metal, showed signs of maintenance. The rust was superficial. The structure itself was sound, and there were tire tracks in the dirt recent enough that the wind hadn't erased them yet. I used the first key to open the padlock. The chain fell away with a metallic rattle that seemed too loud in the desert silence. The hangar doors were heavy, requiring significant effort to slide open even a few feet. When they parted, darkness swallowed the morning light. I found a flashlight just inside the door, sitting on a shelf as if waiting for me. It worked the beam, cutting through shadows to reveal a space so vast it seemed to swallow sound itself. The hangar stretched nearly 200 feet in length and at least 100 feet wide, with a curved roof that rose to 40 feet at its peak. The floor was smooth concrete marked with painted lines and symbols that suggested organized, purposeful use. But it was the shapes under the tarps that stopped my breath. Two massive forms, each more than 40 feet long, covered by heavy canvas secured with military precision. Workbenches lined the walls, filled with tools I recognized and others I didn't. Precision instruments, micrometers, torque wrenches, digital calipers, equipment that cost more than I'd made in a year. This wasn't a storage facility. This was a workspace. A serious, professional, impossibly sophisticated workspace. I approached the nearest tarp. My hands trembled as I unfastened the corner ties. The canvas was heavy industrial grade, arranged to protect whatever lay beneath from decades of dust and moisture. I pulled the tarp back. Metal gleamed in my flashlight beam. Not the rough painted surface of farm equipment or old cars, but smooth, precisely engineered aluminum that caught light like water. As more of the covering came away, shapes emerged that made no sense. The nose was sleek, almost predatory. Air intakes positioned in ways that it suggested speed and sophisticated aerodynamics. This wasn't a crop duster or a small passenger plane. This was something designed for performance. I kept pulling until the entire forward section was visible. Stenciled numbers on the fuselage read XJ-47, a Nighthawk Prototype 1, followed by smaller text that included NATO, and a series of classification codes I didn't understand but recognized as military. My father, the small-town repair shop owner who'd barely made enough to support his family, had a military jet hidden in his hangar. The cockpit canopy was intact, providing a view into an interior far more sophisticated than any civilian aircraft I'd ever seen. The instrument panel was complex, filled with gauges and switches that suggested capabilities beyond simple flight. I stood there, flashlight in hand, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with everything I thought I knew. Thomas Carter fixed radios. He worked in a small workshop behind his house. He lived modestly, died modestly left behind, nothing but an old pickup truck in this apparently worthless airfield. Except it wasn't worthless, it was priceless. In a small office area tucked behind the main workbench, I found more pieces of the puzzle. A desk organized with the same military precision as everything else. A calendar on the wall with the final month marked up through 2 months ago when Thomas had still been alive. And photographs. Thomas as a young man, maybe 30 years old, wearing Air Force uniform and standing next to the very aircraft I'd just uncovered. Next to him stood an officer, 3 stars on his shoulder. Someone had written on the back of the photo, Colonel Marcus Griffin, 1986. There was a filing cabinet locked. I tried the remaining keys until one fit. Inside were maintenance logs, 37 years of careful, meticulous records. The final entry was dated 2 months before Thomas died. June 15th, hydraulic system check complete. No leaks detected. Fuel system purged and sealed. Avionics powered up for systems check. Green. My father had been maintaining this aircraft, keeping it in perfect working condition, right up until the cancer made it impossible to continue. But why? Why hide it? Why keep it secret from his family? Why spend 37 years of his life caring for a machine that, as far as I could tell, had never been flown? I was about to leave when the radio crackled to life. A military communications radio built into the wall of the office. I'd noticed it, but assumed it was dead equipment. Apparently not. Static hiss then cleared. A man's voice, calm and professional, filled the hangar. Nighthawk Base, this is Control 7. Monthly status report overdue. Please acknowledge within 24 hours. Repeat status report overdue. My blood ran cold. Someone was calling. Someone expected a response. Someone had been monitoring this place, checking in, waiting for confirmation that everything was secure. The voice continued. Nighthawk Base protocol requires confirmation of asset security. Failure to respond will trigger investigation. Control 7 out. Silence returned heavy and oppressive. I stood frozen, understanding dawning like a slow sunrise. This wasn't just my father's secret. This was an active operation. Someone somewhere was maintaining oversight, and they didn't know Thomas was dead. I should have called the police. Should have reported finding classified military equipment. Should have done any number of reasonable law-abiding things. Instead, I locked the hangar, got in my truck, and drove home. My mind raced faster than the engine, trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. That evening, Dylan came home around 8. He walked in wearing his usual uniform of black hoodie and expensive headphones he'd saved for months to buy back when he still talked to me about things like that. I need to talk to you, my voice surprised both of us. I hadn't started a conversation with Dylan in, 6 months, a year. He pulled the headphones down around his neck, eyebrows raised. About what? About your grandfather, about something he left us. Dylan shrugged, the universal teenage gesture for whatever. Grandpa was broke. What could he leave us? Come with me tomorrow. I need to show you something. Show me what I can't explain it. You have to see it. He studied me, really looked at me for the first time in months. There was suspicion there, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or hope that his father was finally acting like a father again, instead of a ghost who happened to share living space. Fine. Tomorrow. But if this is some kind of therapy thing, I'm out. It's not therapy, I promise. That night, I reread Thomas's letter. Go to the airfield alone first. Then take Dylan. You'll understand when you see what's there. I was beginning to understand. This wasn't just about aircraft or secrets. It was about connection. About the thing Thomas had failed to do with me. About the thing I was failing to do with Dylan. My father had left me more than a hangar full of classified military hardware. He'd left me a chance to break the cycle. To choose differently than he had chosen. To reach across the silence before it became permanent. Whether I was capable of that remained to be seen. The drive out to the airfield the next morning was tense. Dylan sat in the passenger seat of my truck, staring out the window at the desert landscape sliding past. 20 minutes of silence, broken only by the rattle of bad suspension and the hum of worn tires on asphalt. I tried to start conversations. How's school? Fine. Your friends doing okay? Sure. You seeing anyone, Dad, seriously? Each attempt died before it could develop into anything resembling actual communication. This was what Thomas and I had become. This was what Dylan and I were becoming. 3 generations of Carter men specialists in the art of being alone together. The airfield appeared ahead, and I saw Dylan sit up straighter. The massive hangar dominated the landscape, obviously maintained despite its aged appearance. What is this place? He asked. Your grandfather owned it. For 37 years, apparently. Doing what I don't know, but I'm hoping we can figure it out together. I unlocked the gate, drove through, relocked it behind us. The hangar doors were easier to open the second time, as if they remembered me. Or maybe I was just getting the hang of it. When the doors parted and light flooded in, Dylan's reaction was exactly what mine had been. He stepped out of the truck, slowly, mouth open, staring at the sophisticated workspace my father had maintained in secret. Dad, this place is huge. What did Grandpa need all this room for? Come see? We walked to the covered aircraft together. I showed Dylan how to unfasten the tarp properly, the way Thomas must have done it 1,000 times. As we pulled the canvas back, revealing the sleek metal beneath, I watched my son's face transform from boredom to wonder. What the hell is that? Language, I said automatically, then felt stupid. What did language matter compared to classified military aircraft? Seriously, Dad. What is it? I pointed to the stencil designation. XJ-47, a Nighthawk Prototype 1. Your grandfather had a military jet, maybe two. Dylan pulled out his phone, started searching. I let him. He needed to verify this for himself. After a few minutes, he looked up confused. There's nothing online about XJ-47 Nighthawk. Like nothing. A couple of vague mentions of canceled military projects in the 80s, but no details. No photos. It's like this thing doesn't exist. Except it does exist. We're looking at it. We spent the next hour exploring. Dylan was more engaged than I'd seen him in 2 years. He climbed carefully onto the wing to peer through the cockpit canopy. He examined the engines, took photos from every angle, tried to understand what he was seeing. In the office, he found the photograph of young Thomas and the colonel. He studied it for a long time. Grandpa was in the Air Force, yes. He worked as an electronics technician during the Cold War. At least that's what I always thought. Dylan kept searching, found the filing cabinet. These are locked. I produced the keys. One of them works. He opened the cabinet, pulled out the maintenance logs, started reading. His eyes got wider with each page. Dad, these go back to 1987. Grandpa was taking care of this thing for almost 40 years, I know. But why, if it's classified, why would they let him keep it, and why keep it secret from everyone? I don't know, son, but I think we need to find out. Dylan looked at me, then really looked at me the way he used to when he was small, and thought I had all the answers. Dad, this is crazy. Grandpa had a classified military jet in a secret hangar for most of his life, and we never knew. He also had a son he barely talked to, and a grandson he saw maybe twice a year. Whatever this secret was, it cost him everything. The radio crackled. We both jumped. The same voice as before, calm and professional. Nighthawk Base, this is Control 7. Final warning, 48 hours to respond or we initiate recovery protocol. Dylan grabbed my arm. Dad, what's recovery protocol? I don't know. But it doesn't sound good. We need to call someone. The police maybe, or the FAA, or I don't know, someone who handles secret military planes. I thought about it. Thought about what Thomas had written. Go to the airfield alone first. Then take Dylan. You'll understand. I was starting to understand. This wasn't just about the aircraft. It was about trust. About the choice to share or to hide. About whether I would repeat my father's mistakes or learn from them. Not yet. I need to figure out what's going on first. Your grandfather left me instructions to come here first. There might be more information he left behind. Dylan looked at me, uncertainty written across his face. Are you sure? No. But I'm sure that we're in this together. Whatever happens, we figure it out together. It was the most honest thing I'd said to my son in 2 years, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of trust. We locked the hangar and drove home in silence again. But this time the silence was different. Not the dead silence of two people who'd given up on connection, but the thinking silence of two people trying to understand the same mystery. That night I sat in my trailer and thought about Thomas. About the man who'd spent 37 years maintaining aircraft in secret, who'd sacrificed his relationship with his family for reasons I still didn't understand, who died without ever explaining. But he had explained, I realized, just not in words. The aircraft was his explanation. The hangar was his apology. The keys and the letter and the instruction to bring Dylan, all of it, was Thomas's way of saying what he'd never been able to say in life. I'm sorry, I had reasons, and now it's your turn to choose. My phone buzzed at Dylan. For the first time in months, I answered on the first ring. Dad, I've been thinking about Grandpa, about the plane. We need to find out what Project Nighthawk was, and we need to figure out who Control 7 is before they show up. I smiled. You're right. Where do we start? I found a name in one of the maintenance logs. Someone Grandpa was reporting to. A Colonel Marcus Griffin. Want me to try to find him? Yes, find everything you can. We'll go back to the hangar tomorrow and search more thoroughly. Okay, Dad? Yeah, thanks for showing me. For including me. You're my son, Dylan. You should have always been included. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my trailer and felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope. Not for money or success or any of the things I'd lost, but hope that maybe, just maybe, I could salvage the one thing that still mattered: my relationship with my son. Thomas had left me more than aircraft and keys and mysterious letters. He'd left me a map back to Dylan. Whether I was wise enough to follow it remained to be seen. But for the first time since Linda died, I was going to try. The second aircraft was larger. Dylan found it while I was searching through filing cabinets in the office, looking for anything that might explain why my father had devoted his entire adult life to maintaining classified military equipment in secret. "Dad, you need to see this." His voice carried that particular tone of controlled excitement that teenagers use when they're trying not to seem too interested in something they find absolutely fascinating. I followed him to the far end of the hangar, where another massive tarp concealed what I'd assume was more equipment or spare parts. Together, we unfastened the ties. The canvas fell away to reveal XJ-47B Nighthawk Prototype 2. This one was modified differently from the first. The fuselage had additional compartments. There were markings that looked medical in nature, faded red crosses barely visible under decades of dust. Someone had designed this aircraft for humanitarian missions, for reaching places other planes couldn't go. Two of them. Dylan's voice held wonder and confusion in equal measure. Grandpa had two classified military jets for almost 40 years. I ran my hand along the smooth metal of the fuselage. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Even I could see that, and I knew next to nothing about aircraft. This wasn't some hastily assembled prototype. This was precision engineering, the kind that cost millions and took years to develop. "We need answers." I turned back toward the office. "And I think your grandfather left them for us. We just have to know where to look." The office was small but meticulously organized. Everything had its place. Tools hung on pegboards in perfect rows. Manuals stood in alphabetical order on metal shelving. The desk held a cup of pens, all pointing the same direction, and a notepad with Thomas's last entries dated just weeks before he died. Dylan pulled open drawers while I examined the walls. There had to be more. Thomas wouldn't have left me this mystery without providing some way to solve it. That wasn't his style. For all his silence, my father had always been methodical, thorough, careful. "Dad, look at this." Dylan had found something behind a decorative wooden panel that didn't quite match the others. He pressed on it, and the panel slid aside, revealing a small biometric safe. I tried my thumbprint. Nothing. Dylan tried his. Nothing. Wait, I pulled out my phone, checked Dylan's birthday. July 15th, 2008. I punched the numbers into the keypad. The safe clicked open. Inside were documents that changed everything I thought I understood. The first was a sales contract dated September 23rd, 1987. Seller, United States Department of Defense Surplus Asset Division. Buyer, Thomas Edward Carter. Property 2XJ, 47 Nighthawk prototype aircraft. Price $3.2 million. $3.2 million. The number was incomprehensible. My father had never earned more than $40,000 a year in his life. Where would he get $3 million? The second document answered that question. It was a trust agreement. The Nighthawk Preservation Trust Fund, established by 15 founding members, all military officers and civilian engineers. Total capital contribution, $3.2 million. Asset custodian, Thomas Edward Carter. Inheritance rights to be transferred to Thomas Carter's son upon his death. My father hadn't bought the aircraft with his own money. He'd been chosen as the guardian, the keeper, the one trusted to maintain them, while others provided the funding. But why a letter tucked behind the contracts provided context? The letterhead was official Department of Defense, but most of the identifying information had been redacted. Only fragments remained readable. Project Nighthawk assets to remain under custodial care of Technical Sergeant Thomas Carter, retired. Humanitarian mission parameters classified. Political sensitivity requires indefinite postponement of operational deployment. Assets to be maintained in operational readiness pending future authorization. Disclosure prohibited for protection of custodian's family. Dylan read over my shoulder, so Grandpa didn't steal them. He was supposed to keep them, and he kept it secret to protect us. I thought about Thomas working alone in this hangar for 37 years. maintaining aircraft that couldn't officially exist, filing reports to mysterious handlers who called themselves Control 7, living with a secret so big it had swallowed his entire life, and doing it all to protect us from threats we never knew existed. Keep searching. There has to be more. 20 minutes later, Dylan found the journals. They were hidden in a false bottom drawer in the desk, three leather-bound notebooks containing 37 years of my father's private thoughts. The handwriting started out neat and precise in the early volumes, gradually becoming shakier as the years passed and age took its toll. I opened the first one. The date was September 25th, 1987, 2 days after Thomas had legally purchased the aircraft. Today I bought the planes, not with my money but with the trust of 15 people who believe these aircraft are too important to destroy. We couldn't let them be scrapped. They were designed to save lives, not take them. Now I'm the keeper. It's an honor, but also a burden. Ben is 15 years old. He doesn't understand why I work all the time. He thinks I don't care about him. How can I explain? How can I tell him that I'm protecting a secret that could endanger our family? The briefing was clear. Foreign governments, corporate interests, even criminal organizations would kill to acquire this technology. If they knew the aircraft existed, if they knew I had them, my family would become targets. So I stay silent. And he grows more distant every day. I'm watching my son slip away from me, and the only way I can protect him is to let him think I don't care. It's the cruelest choice I've ever had to make. My throat tightened. I'd been 15 in 1987. I remembered that year, remembered feeling invisible to my father, unimportant, not worth his time. And all along, he'd been protecting me. Keep reading, Dylan said quietly. I flipped forward. The entries were sporadic, written whenever Thomas felt the need to record his thoughts. June 1990. Ben graduated high school today. I couldn't attend. Control 7 called with an urgent issue, a fuel leak that needed immediate attention. When I got home, my wife was crying. She said Ben kept looking for me in the crowd. Finally gave up. I'm a terrible father, but I can't change course now. The secret is bigger than me. June 2005. Ben married Linda today. She seems like a good woman. Will be a good wife. I stood in the corner of the reception hall watching my son smile and laugh with his new family. I wanted to tell him I'm proud, but 30 years of silence can't be broken in a wedding reception. The words died before they reached my mouth. August 2008, my grandson was born today. Dylan Thomas Carter. Ben named him after me. Thomas, my son still loves me, despite everything I've done to push him away. I held the baby for 3 minutes, then handed him back and walked away because I didn't trust myself not to cry. The planes are my responsibility, but Ben was always my priority. How do I make him understand that I had to stop reading? Tears blurred the words. Dylan sat next to me, his hand on my shoulder, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. We'd both been wrong about Thomas. So completely, utterly wrong. He hadn't been distant because he didn't care. He'd been distant because he cared too much. Because he was protecting something he believed was more important than his own happiness, and the weight of that protection had crushed his ability to connect with the people he loved most. There was one more entry I needed to read. The last one dated June 10th, just 2 months before Thomas died. The doctors gave me 2 to 3 months, liver cancer stage 4. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid Ben will never understand. So I'm writing letters, leaving instructions. The aircraft go to him, not because of their monetary value, though they're worth a fortune, but because it's the only way I can explain. I was never disappointed in you, Ben. I was protecting you. And in doing so, I lost you. Don't make the same mistake with Dylan. The planes are a legacy, but your son is the real treasure. Choose him. Don't choose silence like I did. Dylan was crying now, too. We sat together in that small office, 2 generations of Carter men finally understanding the third. We stayed at the hangar until dark, reading through the journals, piecing together Thomas's hidden life. The pattern was clear. Monthly calls from Control 7 checking on the aircraft status. Regular maintenance schedules followed with military precision. And woven through it all, regret. Deep, aching regret about the family he'd sacrificed for a mission that had never been completed. That night back at the trailer, Dylan didn't disappear into his room like usual. He sat at the fold-out table with me, and we talked. Really talked for the first time since Linda died. I messed up, I told him. After your mom passed, I shut down. Just like Grandpa shut down. I was so deep in my own grief, I forgot you were grieving too. Dylan nodded. It hurt. Feeling like you didn't want to be around me. I always wanted to be around you. I just didn't know how to be a father without your mother. She was the one who knew what to say, how to connect. I was just the guy who fixed cars and paid bills. You're more than that, Dad. I hope so, because I don't want to waste whatever time we have left being strangers. We spent the next hour talking about Linda, sharing memories, crying together in a way we should have done 2 years ago. The aircraft had given us permission to grieve, to connect, to finally bridge the silence that had defined 3 generations of our family. 3 days later, the phone call came. I was at the hangar with Dylan cataloging equipment and trying to understand the full scope of what Thomas had maintained when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Carter. The voice was male, older, carrying authority like a military officer who'd spent decades giving orders and expecting them to be followed. Yes, who is this? Someone who served with your father. I need to warn you, don't trust General Williams when he contacts you. What? Who's General Williams, the man from Control 7? He's going to offer to buy the aircraft back. He'll say it's for national security. Don't believe him. I don't understand. Why would you warn me? Because Thomas was my friend. And because Williams doesn't represent the people your father made his promise to. He represents corporate interests. Defense contractors who want the Nighthawk technology for profit, not protection. Who are you? Fine, Colonel Marcus Griffin. Retired, living in Tucson. He's the only one who can help you now. The line went dead. Dylan had been listening, his face pale. Dad, what was that about? I don't know, but I think we need to find this Colonel Griffin. Fast. It took Dylan less than an hour of internet searching to locate Marcus Allen Griffin, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. Age 72, living in a modest house in Tucson, Arizona. Phone number listed publicly as if he had nothing to hide. I called at 8 in the evening. A deep voice answered. Yes, Colonel Griffin. My name is Ben Carter. I'm Thomas Carter's son. Silence. Then Thomas passed away, didn't he? 3 months ago. How did you know I attended the funeral? Stood in the back. Didn't introduce myself because it wasn't time yet. And now it's time. You found the aircraft. Yes, and you have questions. A lot of questions. I'll be there tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Don't talk to anyone else until we meet. Especially not General Williams. He hung up before I could respond. Dylan and I spent a restless night at the hangar. We didn't want to leave the aircraft unguarded, not with mysterious warnings about corporate interests and government officials we'd never heard of. We set up camping equipment in the office, took turns keeping watch, and waited for morning. At 9:03, a sedan pulled up to the hangar. The man who emerged was tall, ramrod straight, despite his age, with close-cropped white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore civilian clothes, but everything about his bearing screamed military officer. He walked directly to me, hand extended. Ben Carter, you look like your father. Same eyes. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, confident. Colonel Griffin, just Marcus now. I've been retired for 20 years. He looked past me at the hangar. Can we go inside? I let him in. Dylan followed, staying close. Marcus walked straight to the aircraft, running his hand along the fuselage with the familiarity of someone who'd known these machines intimately. XJ-47 Nighthawk, the most advanced humanitarian aircraft ever designed. And nobody knows they exist. Humanitarian, Dylan spoke up. I thought they were military. Marcus turned to look at my son. They were both. Designed for NATO in the early 80s to deliver medical supplies and personnel to disaster zones. The problem was all the features that made them perfect for humanitarian work also made them perfect for intelligence gathering and covert operations. Some politicians got nervous, decided the risk of the technology falling into the wrong hands was too great. So they ordered them destroyed, I asked. Marcus nodded. In 1987, yes, Project Nighthawk was terminated. All prototypes and documentation were to be eliminated. But Thomas bought them instead. We bought them. 15 of us. Military officers and civilian engineers who'd worked on the project. We couldn't stomach destroying technology that could save thousands of lives. So we pooled our money, found a legal loophole, and convinced the Defense Department to sell rather than destroy. And my father agreed to be the custodian. Your father was the chief maintenance engineer on the project. He understood these aircraft better than anyone, and he was the most trustworthy man I ever served with. When we needed someone to guard the Nighthawks indefinitely, Thomas was the only choice. Dylan stepped forward. But why keep it secret? Why not just tell people the planes were preserved? Marcus's expression darkened, because not everyone wanted them preserved. There were and are people who see the Nighthawk technology as a gold mine. The stealth capabilities alone would be worth hundreds of millions to the right buyer. If word got out that the prototype still existed, we'd have corporations, foreign governments, even elements within our own military trying to acquire them. Is that why someone warned us about General Williams? Marcus's jaw tightened. Harold Williams used to be a good officer. Then he retired and went to work for North Defense Corporation. Now he's their point man for acquiring proprietary military technology. He's been looking for the Nighthawks for years. What does he want with them to reverse engineer the technology? Sell it to the highest bidder, probably overseas. Williams doesn't care about humanitarian missions or saving lives. He cares about profit. Before I could respond, we heard vehicles approaching. Multiple engines moving fast. Marcus moved to the door, looked out, then turned back to us with grim determination. That's Williams. He must have been monitoring your father's communications. Lock the hangar. Don't let them in without a warrant. Two black Suburbans pulled up outside. 5 men in dark suits emerged, followed by a 6th man in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of absolute authority. General Harold Williams walked to the hangar door like he owned it. When he found it locked, he knocked 3 sharp raps. Mr. Carter, I know you're in there. I need to speak with you about a matter of national security. I opened the small access door, keeping the chain latched. I'm Ben Carter. What do you want? Williams smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I represent the Department of Defense in matters related to classified asset recovery. I understand you've discovered aircraft that belong to the United States government. I have documentation showing my father purchased these aircraft legally in 1987. Incorrect. Your father was granted custodial privileges, not ownership. Now that he's deceased, those privileges are terminated. The aircraft revert to government control. Marcus appeared beside me. Hello, Harold. Still lying for money, I see. Williams's smile vanished. Marcus Griffin, I should have known you'd be involved. I helped establish the legal framework for Thomas's ownership. The aircraft were purchased, not loaned. Ben has full legal rights. Williams pulled a folder from his jacket. I have authorization to recover these assets. You can cooperate and receive fair compensation, or we can do this the hard way. Dylan spoke from behind us. What's fair compensation? Williams looked at my son, calculations visible behind his eyes. $5 million. Cash. Within 48 hours. Dylan's sharp intake of breath told me he understood how much money that was. For a kid who'd grown up in a trailer park, $5 million was an impossible fortune. But I'd read Thomas's journals. I'd seen what my father had sacrificed, and I understood finally what he'd been protecting. No, Williams raised an eyebrow. No, these aircraft aren't for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Mr. Carter, you don't understand your position. I can make your life very difficult. Legal challenges, tax audits, questions about how your father acquired classified military property. Then I guess you better start, because I'm not selling. Williams stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled again, cold and predatory. You'll regret this decision. He turned and walked back to his vehicle. The Suburbans drove away in a cloud of dust. Marcus closed the door. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. But it's what Thomas would have done. Yes, Marcus smiled for the first time since arriving. Yes, it is. Now we need to prepare. Because Williams wasn't bluffing. He's going to come at you with everything he has. Dylan looked between us. So what do? We fight. Marcus pulled out his phone. I know a lawyer who specializes in government asset disputes. And we need to document everything. Gather all of Thomas's records and prepare for a legal battle. How much will this come? I thought about my bank account, which currently held $843. Don't worry about that. The Preservation Trust still exists. 7 of the original 15 members are still alive. We've been saving for this day, hoping it wouldn't come, but ready if it did. Over the next week, we transformed the hangar into a command center. Patricia Vance, the lawyer Marcus recommended, arrived with boxes of legal precedents and case files. She was 48, sharp-eyed, and had a reputation for destroying government overreach in court. She spent 2 days reviewing Thomas's documentation, then looked up with satisfaction. Your father was meticulous. Every purchase, every maintenance log, every communication is documented. The ownership is ironclad. But I could hear the but coming. But North Defense Corporation has unlimited resources and no scruples. They'll drag this out, make it expensive, try to force you into settlement. How expensive? 300,000 minimum if it goes to trial. I don't have that kind of money, Patricia smiled. I know. Your father saved my father's life during a test flight in 1985. This is how I repay that debt. I'll work pro bono. 2 days later, North Defense Corporation filed suit. The papers were delivered by courier, thick legal documents, claiming that Thomas had maintained classified military equipment without proper authorization, that the aircraft posed a national security risk, and that they should be immediately surrendered to North Defense for proper disposal. Dylan read the filing, face pale. They're saying Grandpa was basically a criminal. That's exactly what they're saying. Because if they can paint Thomas as unreliable, they can challenge the legitimacy of his ownership. Patricia reviewed the filing and snorted. They're reaching, but they're also using language designed to scare you into settling. Don't fall for it. That night, Marcus Webb, the CEO of North Defense Corporation, showed up at the hangar in a limousine. He was 59, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. Mr. Carter, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Can we talk man to man? Dylan started to object, but I held up a hand. What do you want to say? Webb walked around the hangar, examining the aircraft with obvious appreciation. Beautiful machines. Ahead of their time. Still ahead of their time, really? Get to the point. $10 million. Cash. You walk away, forget this ever happened. Live comfortably for the rest of your life. Dylan's eyes widened. I could see him doing the math, thinking about what 10 million could buy. College, a house, security, everything we didn't have. No, I said. 15 million, no. Webb's pleasant expression cracked. You understand, I can destroy you. Tie you up in legal battles for years, bankrupt you, take your home, your son's future. I stepped closer to him. My father spent 37 years protecting these aircraft. Gave up his family, his happiness, everything that mattered. I'm not going to dishonor that for $15 million. Or $150 million. Webb stared at me, cold calculation in his eyes. You're a fool. Maybe. But I'm my father's son. After he left, Dylan hugged me. Dad, I'm proud of you for turning down $15 million, for understanding what really matters. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was built to intimidate. Marble columns rose 40 feet to a vaulted ceiling. Everything echoed voices and footsteps bouncing off stone until individual sounds became an indistinct murmur of institutional authority. I'd never felt smaller than I did walking through those doors. Dylan walked beside me wearing the only suit he owned, borrowed from a friend, and slightly too large in the shoulders. Patricia Vance led the way, her briefcase full of Thomas's meticulous documentation. Marcus Griffin followed behind, a silent guardian who'd traveled this path before and knew its dangers. The courtroom was already packed. News of the case had spread, picked up by aviation enthusiasts and military history buffs who understood the significance of what was at stake. Two XJ-47 Nighthawk prototypes, supposedly destroyed in 1987, had survived in secret for 37 years. Now their fate would be decided by a federal judge. Judge Patricia Hamilton was 64 with silver hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and reading glasses that she peered over when she wanted to convey displeasure. She'd spent 20 years on the bench and had a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense to reach the truth beneath. The defense table held David Morrison, lead counsel for North Defense Corporation, and 3 junior attorneys who looked fresh out of law school and eager to prove themselves. Morrison was 50, silver-tongued, and known for winning cases that should have been losses. Behind them sat Harold Williams, watching the proceedings with the detached interest of a man who believed the outcome was already decided in his favor. Judge Hamilton gavelled the court to order. Mr. Morrison, you may present your opening statement. Morrison stood buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Your Honor, this case is about national security. The XJ-47 Nighthawk aircraft contained classified technology that was never meant to remain in civilian hands. Thomas Carter was granted temporary custodial privileges in 1987 with the understanding that the aircraft would be returned when requested by proper authority. His death terminates those privileges. North Defense Corporation, under contract with the Department of Defense, has the legal right and responsibility to recover these assets. He spoke for 20 minutes, weaving a narrative of irresponsible civilians holding dangerous technology of national security risks and proper government oversight. It was persuasive. Watching the judge's face, I couldn't tell if we were winning or losing. Patricia stood for our opening statement. She was shorter than Morrison, less polished in her delivery, but there was steel beneath her words. Your Honor, this case is actually quite simple. Thomas Carter legally purchased 2 aircraft in 1987 through a properly documented sale authorized by the Department of Defense. He paid $3.2 million, maintained the aircraft to military specifications for 37 years, and left them to his son in a legally binding will. North Defense Corporation has no claim to these assets. They're trying to use legal intimidation to acquire valuable technology they have no right to possess. Judge Hamilton removed her glasses, cleaned them slowly, and replaced them. Let's see the evidence. The first witness Morrison called was James Bradford, former Undersecretary of Defense during the Reagan administration. He was 78 now, white-haired and shaky, but his mind was still sharp. Mr. Bradford, Morrison began, were you involved in the decision to terminate Project Nighthawk in 1987? Yes. There were concerns about the technology falling into hostile hands. The decision was made to eliminate all prototypes and documentation. And did you authorize Thomas Carter to purchase the aircraft? Bradford paused. I don't recall authorizing any such purchase. Patricia stood. Objection. I have documentation that contradicts this testimony. Judge Hamilton nodded. Approach. Patricia handed over an email dated September 1987, sent from Bradford's official Defense Department account. The text was clear. Purchase approved per our discussion. Thomas Carter authorized to take possession of XJ 47 prototypes under agreed terms. Congratulations on finding a creative solution. Bradford's face went pale. I signed many documents in those years. I may have forgotten. Or you're lying to protect corporate interests. Patricia's voice was sharp. Counsel, Judge Hamilton's warning tone was mild but effective. Keep it professional. Apologies, Your Honor, but I think the document speaks for itself. Morrison recovered quickly, moving to his next witness. But the damage was done. Bradford's credibility was shattered, and with it the foundation of North Defense's claim that the sale had been unauthorized. The trial continued for 3 days. Morrison brought in military experts who testified about the sensitivity of the Nighthawk technology. Patricia countered with aviation historians who explained the aircraft's humanitarian design mission. Documents piled up. Testimony accumulated. The judge took pages of notes. On the 4th day, Patricia called her key witness. Colonel Marcus Griffin took the stand and was sworn in. Colonel Griffin, Patricia began, what was your role in Project Nighthawk? I was the commanding officer. Oversaw design development and testing from 1983 through 1987. And when the project was terminated, what happened to the prototypes? Officially, they were to be destroyed. Unofficially, 15 of us military officers and civilian engineers pooled our money to purchase them instead. We believed the technology was too valuable to lose. Valuable for what purpose? Saving lives. The Nighthawk was designed to reach disaster zones conventional aircraft couldn't access. Remote areas, hostile territories, places where people were dying because help couldn't arrive in time. We couldn't let that capability be destroyed for political reasons. In Thomas Carter's role, Thomas was our chief maintenance engineer, the best I ever worked with. When we needed someone to maintain the aircraft indefinitely, someone we could trust, absolutely, Thomas was the unanimous choice. Morrison stood for cross-examination. Colonel, isn't it true that the same technology that makes these aircraft perfect for humanitarian missions also makes them perfect for espionage? Yes. And you saw no security risk in leaving classified stealth technology in civilian hands for nearly 4 decades. I saw greater risk in destroying the only humanitarian rapid deployment aircraft ever built. We made our choice. I stand by it. Even now, knowing that hostile nations would pay hundreds of millions for this technology, Marcus looked directly at Morrison. The people who want these aircraft for profit are sitting at your table, counselor. Not in hostile nations, right here in this courtroom. The gallery erupted. Judge Hamilton gavelled for order. Mr. Griffin, confine yourself to answering questions. Morrison pressed. You have no evidence that North Defense plans to sell this technology. Patricia stood. Actually, Your Honor, we do. She produced a folder, approached the bench. Inside were printouts of internal emails from North Defense Corporation. Dillon had found them recovered from a surveillance device the company had carelessly left behind at the hangar. The emails detailed plans to reverse engineer the Nighthawk technology and market it to foreign buyers with projected profits exceeding $90 million. Morrison objected. These documents were obtained illegally. Judge Hamilton reviewed them carefully. I'll determine admissibility after examining the chain of custody. But Mr. Morrison, if these are authentic, your client has serious problems beyond this courtroom. She looked at Williams, who sat motionless, his expression unchanged. I'm referring this matter to the FBI for investigation of potential violations of export control laws. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Morrison requested a recess. Judge Hamilton granted it. In the hallway, Dillon grabbed my arm. Dad, we might actually win this. Don't celebrate yet. Judges can be unpredictable. But Patricia was smiling. That went better than I hoped. The FBI referral is huge. It shows Hamilton takes the corruption allegations seriously. The afternoon session brought our final witness. Dillon Carter took the stand, and I watched my son square his shoulders, ready to face whatever came. Morrison approached him with the practiced sympathy of a predator lulling prey. Dillon, you're 16 years old, is that correct? Yes, sir, and your family's financial situation is, let's say, difficult. We don't have much money, if that's what you mean. Your father is unemployed, you live in a trailer, you have significant debt. Dillon's jaw tightened. Yes. Wouldn't selling these aircraft solve all those problems? Give you money for college? A better home security? It would, so why not sell? Why fight this battle? Dillon looked at me, then back at Morrison. Because my grandfather spent 37 years protecting something he believed was more important than money. He sacrificed his relationship with my dad, with me, with everyone he loved. If we sell now, we're saying that sacrifice was worthless, that he wasted his life. But he's dead. He'll never know. I'll know. Dillon's voice was firm, and I have to live with myself. My grandfather taught me that some things matter more than money. Honor matters. Integrity matters. Keeping your word matters. Even if it means staying poor. Even then. Morrison had no response. He returned to his table, and I saw Judge Hamilton watching Dillon with something that might have been approval. The trial recessed for 3 days while Hamilton reviewed the evidence. 3 days of waiting, wondering, hoping. Dillon and I stayed at the hangar, unwilling to leave the aircraft unguarded. Marcus joined us, and Patricia stopped by each evening with updates that were really just speculation dressed in legal language. On the third night, I found myself alone in Thomas's office reading the final entries in his journal. The last one was dated June 20th, 4 days before he entered hospice care for the final time. I'm dying. The cancer has won. Strange how that knowledge brings clarity. All the things I worried about, the secrets, which I kept the distance I maintained, none of it matters now. What matters is whether Ben will understand, whether he'll forgive me, whether he'll choose differently than I did. I've left him the aircraft, the journals, the whole truth. But more importantly, I've left him a choice. He can sell them, take the money live comfortably. No one would blame him, or he can keep them, honor the mission, continue. What we started, either way, I'm proud of him. I always was. I just couldn't say it while I was alive. The secret was too heavy. It crushed everything else. Ben, if you read this, know that I loved you. Every day, even when I couldn't show it. Especially when I couldn't show it. The distance between us was my greatest failure and my deepest regret. Don't make the same mistake with Dillon. Don't let silence destroy what matters most. And if you keep the aircraft, there's a plan. A way to honor their original purpose while making them available for the humanitarian missions they were designed for. It's all in the red folder. My dream, if you choose to fulfill it. I love you, son. Always have. Always will. Your father, Thomas Edward Carter. I found the red folder exactly where he'd indicated, tucked behind a false panel in his desk. Inside were detailed architectural plans, budget projections, partnership proposals with humanitarian organizations. Thomas had designed an entire aviation heritage center, a museum and training facility that would preserve the Nighthawks while making them available for disaster relief missions. He'd thought of everything: funding sources, educational programs, partnerships with the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders, a complete vision for how classified aircraft could serve their intended purpose while remaining secure. Dylan found me there, tears streaming down my face. "Dad, what is it?" "Your grandfather. He left us a roadmap, a way to honor what he protected while actually using it to help people." I showed him the plans. Dylan studied them, eyes wide. "This is incredible. He really did think of everything, except how to tell his family while he was alive. That's the one thing he couldn't figure out." On Friday morning, we returned to the courthouse. The gallery was even more packed than before. Word had spread about the FBI investigation into North Defense. Several major news outlets had sent reporters. This was no longer just a property dispute. It was a story about corporate corruption and government accountability. Judge Hamilton entered, expression neutral. She settled into her chair, arranged her papers, and looked out at the courtroom. "I've reviewed all evidence and testimony. This case presents complex questions about classified technology, national security, and private property rights. However, the law is actually quite clear." My heart hammered against my ribs. Thomas Carter purchased the XJ-47 Nighthawk aircraft in 1987 through a legitimate documented sale authorized by the Department of Defense. He paid fair market value, maintained them according to contractual requirements, and left them to his son through a legally binding will. The transfer of ownership is valid. Relief flooded through me. Dylan grabbed my hand. "Regarding North Defense Corporation's claims," Judge Hamilton continued, "I find no legal basis for their assertion of ownership or right of recovery. The aircraft are private property, legitimately acquired and properly maintained. However, given the classified nature of the technology, I'm imposing certain restrictions." She read from her notes. "The aircraft must remain in the United States. They cannot be sold or transferred without federal approval. They must be maintained to security standards that prevent unauthorized access to classified systems. And any future operational use must be approved by appropriate humanitarian or defense agencies. Subject to those restrictions, Benjamin Carter is the legal owner of both XJ-47 Nighthawk prototype aircraft and all associated equipment and documentation." She gavelled. "This court is adjourned." The gallery erupted in applause. Patricia hugged me. Marcus shook my hand with a grip that spoke of profound satisfaction. Dylan wrapped his arms around me and didn't let go. Morrison packed his briefcase in silence. William stood and walked out without a word, his face carved from stone. We'd won. That night, we celebrated at a diner in Phoenix. Nothing fancy, just burgers and milkshakes, but it felt like the finest meal I'd ever eaten. Marcus told stories about Thomas in his younger days, bringing my father to life in ways I'd never known. Patricia outlined the next steps, the paperwork we'd need to file, the security protocols we'd need to establish. But mostly, Dylan and I just sat together, father and son, finally understanding what we had and what we'd almost lost. The next 6 months passed in a blur of activity. We transformed the hangar according to Thomas's plans, turning it into the Thomas Carter Aviation Heritage Center. Marcus helped secure funding from the Preservation Trust. Patricia navigated the legal requirements. Dylan threw himself into the work with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since before Linda died. Local contractors donated labor. Aviation enthusiasts volunteered time. The story of the secret aircraft and the father who'd protected them for 37 years captured people's imagination. Donations poured in small amounts from individuals who believed in the mission. We hired museum designers who created exhibits explaining Project Nighthawk's humanitarian mission without compromising classified details. Interactive displays let visitors explore the aircraft's systems. Educational programs brought school groups to learn about aviation and public service. The aircraft themselves remained the centerpiece, positioned to allow close examination while preserving their operational integrity. Detailed placards explained their capabilities and their continued readiness for humanitarian missions should proper authorization ever be granted. Dylan became the most effective guide, his genuine enthusiasm infectious. He could explain complex aerodynamics to elementary school students and debate design specifications with aerospace engineers. Watching him, I saw echoes of Thomas, the careful precision, the deep knowledge, the commitment to something larger than himself. But unlike Thomas, Dylan knew how to connect, how to share, how to build bridges instead of walls. 6 months after the trial, on a cold February morning, we held the official opening ceremony. 2,000 people attended. The governor of Arizona cut the ribbon. Representatives from humanitarian organizations toured the facility. News crews documented everything. I stood at a podium looking out at the crowd and thought about what to say. How to honor Thomas's sacrifice while explaining why we'd chosen to share rather than sell. My father spent 37 years protecting these aircraft in secret. He gave up his family, his happiness, everything that mattered to him personally. For a long time, I didn't understand why. I thought he simply didn't care about me. I paused, collecting myself. I was wrong. He cared deeply, too deeply. He sacrificed his relationship with me to protect something he believed could save lives. That sacrifice nearly destroyed our family. It did destroy any chance we had of real connection while he was alive. But it also taught me something crucial. Legacy isn't what we leave behind, it's how we live. My father lived with absolute integrity, protecting something important even when no one else knew. That's the real inheritance he left me. Not the aircraft, not the property, but the example of choosing principle over personal interest. Today we open this center to honor him and to ensure that the aircraft he protected can finally serve their intended purpose, educating people about the intersection of technology and humanitarian service. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was looking at Dylan standing in the front row, tears streaming down his face, pride written across his features. After the ceremony, people lined up to tour the facility. Dylan and I stood by the entrance greeting visitors, answering questions. An older woman approached, probably in her 70s, leaning on a cane. "Are you Thomas Carter's son?" "Yes, ma'am." She smiled. "He fixed my radio once 30 years ago. Wouldn't take payment. Said he was just glad he could help." I never forgot that kindness. She moved on, but others followed. People Thomas had helped over the years, quiet acts of service he'd never mentioned. Each story added another layer to my understanding of who my father had been. That evening, after everyone left, Dylan and I stood in the empty hangar, looking at the aircraft gleaming under display lights. "Grandpa would be proud," Dylan said. "I hope so." Dylan turned to me. "Dad, I've been thinking, I want to study aerospace engineering. Not just as a career. I want to continue what Grandpa started. Improve these designs. Maybe someday build the next generation of humanitarian aircraft." My throat tightened. "Your grandfather would love that. What about you? What do you think? I think you're going to do amazing things. And I'm going to be there to watch. No matter what." We stood together in comfortable silence, something that would have been impossible a year ago. The aircraft had given us this, a way back to each other. 3 months later, we received word that one of the Nighthawks had been approved for a trial mission. A massive earthquake in Central America had left thousands stranded in remote mountain villages. Traditional aircraft couldn't reach them. The Nighthawk could. Dylan and I watched as volunteer pilots, all former Air Force, conducted final checks. Medical supplies filled the cargo bay. Everything Thomas had maintained for 37 years was finally being used for its intended purpose. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, its hybrid engines nearly silent. We watched it disappear into the distance, carrying hope to people who desperately needed it. That's when I finally understood what Thomas had been protecting. Not just aircraft, not just technology, but the possibility that humans could build tools for helping instead of harming, that we could choose service over profit, that we could be better than our worst impulses. He'd kept that possibility alive for 37 years, waiting for the moment when the world would be ready to receive it. A year after the trial, on a quiet Sunday evening, I sat alone in Thomas's old office. The museum was closed. Dylan was at college studying aerospace engineering. I pulled out the journals one more time, reading the entries I'd memorized but couldn't stop returning to. The last page had a final note I'd almost missed, written in such shaky handwriting I'd initially thought it was random scratches. "Ben, you asked me once when you were 10 years old if I was proud of you. I said I was busy. I didn't answer. The truth is, I was always proud. From the moment you were born, every day of your life. I just couldn't find the words while I was alive. Secrets are heavy. They crush everything else. Don't carry secrets, son. Live in the light. Love openly. Let Dylan know every day that he matters. That's the real legacy. Not what we protect, but how we love." I traced the words with my finger, feeling the indentations where Thomas had pressed too hard, his dying hand struggling to form letters. I'm trying, Dad. Every day, I'm trying. My phone buzzed. Dylan, just checking in, seeing what you're up to. I smiled. A year ago, he wouldn't have bothered. Now we talked every day, sometimes about important things, often about nothing at all. The content didn't matter. The connection did. At home, reading Grandpa's journals again. You okay? Yeah, just thinking about how far we've come. Pretty far. Love you, Dad. 3 words Dylan hadn't said in 2 years before Thomas died. Now he said them easily, naturally, because we'd learned what Thomas never had. That love unexpressed becomes love lost. That silence, no matter how well-intentioned, destroys what matters most. Love you too, son. I locked up the office and walked through the dark hangar. The aircraft sat silent, waiting. Ready. Proof that sometimes the things we protect in secret need to be shared to fulfill their purpose. Thomas had spent 37 years guarding these machines. I would spend however many years I had left making sure they served the mission he'd envisioned. Not alone in a hidden hangar, but openly in partnership with people who shared the dream of technology used for good. That was the real inheritance. Not the aircraft themselves, but the choice to honor the mission while breaking the silence. To preserve the legacy while healing the wounds it had caused. As I drove home through the desert night, I thought about the 3 generations of Carter men. Thomas, who'd sacrificed everything for a secret. Me, who'd almost repeated his mistakes. And Dylan, who would carry forward the best parts of what we'd learned while discarding the worst. The cycle was broken. The silence was ended. And somehow, impossibly, we'd turned tragedy into triumph, isolation, into connection, secrets, into stories that could inspire others. The Nighthawks still stood ready, maintained perfection, capable of flying at a moment's notice. But their real mission was already accomplished. They'd brought a family back together. They'd taught us that some things matter more than money, that integrity outlasts profit, that love, even when poorly expressed, can bridge any distance if you're willing to try. Thomas had left me more than aircraft. He'd left me the chance to choose differently, to be the father he couldn't be, to live in the light instead of shadows. I'd taken that chance, and in doing so, I'd found my way home.